hopefully we will actually get to all 10 recommendations in the time that we have. But if discussion, leads us in a different direction, we will try to accommodate that as well. I want to tell you about some changes afoot in, 2025 and moving into 2026, in particular around the rise of AI platforms as a new paradigm for search, defining a new search behavior. People are talking about search engine optimization is becoming search everywhere optimization, and search is a behavior and not a platform. And AI is really defining a lot of that discussion. So I know there's a lot of questions, a lot of concerns around AI visibility, and we're going to really cut to the tactical level here in this conversation. There's also a lot of AI showing up in the traditional search interface these days. So it isn't really just a matter of optimizing for a separate user experience in ChatGPT. It's a kind of an unavoidable thing that you have to be thinking about. Am I showing up in AI overviews at the top of the traditional Google search result page? Because they're going to be unavoidable. Google's now talking about building Gemini directly into Chrome, for example. So in many different ways, many different examples, interfaces that we're already using that maybe people who wouldn't go to ChatGPT are already using. They're going to be injected with AI features if that hasn't already happened. So these questions about how to appear in AI are going to be really critical. I have 10 recommendations. I tried to distill it down to the things that I thought were most important. And again, I hope, we'll leave space for discussion. In fact, we want to ask a question to start us off. Leah's going to launch a little poll here. The question being, how often do you ask AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, or Perplexity to recommend a local business or service? Is this something you've done daily, weekly, monthly, or rarely slash never? Just take a second to choose the best answer for you.
I'll let it run for about a couple more seconds. All right, I'm going to end it, guys, and then I'll share.
Interesting. So 16% of you say that you use AI tools to do local searches daily. That's amazing. 31% weekly, 19% monthly, and about a third have rarely or never done this. So back around March, we launched our Consumer Behavior Index, which said that overall consumers had done that about 9% of the time. And I said I just came back from an SEO conference. There was a research that was announced there, which says that overall consumers are doing that now about the local searches on AI platforms about 38% of the time. So we are, some of us, in the kind of leading edge of those behaviors, it sounds like. Well, we know that Google search is down. SparkToro data using clickstream data from Datos, actually, SparkToro did a report showing that Google searches are down 15% since April of 2024. There's lots of reasons for this. People are using social for search, especially in the younger demographics. But a large explanation for the decline in search is that there's this rise in AI usage. This is an example of Google Analytics data that we track on behalf of some of our clients. The referrals from AI tools are growing significantly, especially ChatGPT, which is the green line that goes way up after April. There was, for instance, 158% month over month growth from just April to May of this year in referrals from ChatGPT. It's not the biggest referrer necessarily, but the growth trajectory is really the story where basically what that means is people are searching more and more for local brands, as we were just discussing, and ChatGPT is sending traffic to those brand websites. And ChatGPT itself is growing fast. It is the biggest AI tool. So it kind of is the stand-in for the trend, you might say. The most amazing stat that I've seen is the doubling of growth between February and April of this year, from 400 million weekly active users up to 800 million. I've heard 700 million, so I'm not sure why the discrepancy, but anyway, it's big, right? So roughly 800 million people are using ChatGPT every week for many different things. And as we just saw, local is certainly an aspect of that. Local has always been one of the top three search use cases. So as soon as ChatGPT was able to access search as a function, which is not that long, it's only since last fall that it launched Search GPT, it was called, that behavior began to manifest, and it's just been growing ever since. So, what are some of the top tactics? What should local marketers do to respond to the rise of AI? Well, my first recommendation is a pretty basic one, which is just to devote time to LLM optimization. We don't know what that means yet, but that's what we're going to dig into in the rest of the conversation. So prioritize LLM optimization. I'm saying Google, ChatGPT, and Perplexity. When I say Google, that's Gemini. Gemini is its own consumer application, gemini.google.com, soon to be a part of Chrome, but it's also the LLM that powers AI overviews and the complete AI search experience, which Google is calling AI mode. So all of those things are powered by the same LLM. So that optimization needs to be part of your focus because people are going to see it whether or not they go to a native AI application. ChatGPT is, of course, the most popular native application, and Perplexity is kind of third on the list, but still important as a AI search engine, really the first important AI search engine, which has pretty good support for local search. So that's one that people are going to be using as well. I would say devote about 20 to 30% of your local marketing efforts at least to LLM optimization. But don't neglect traditional local search, reputation management, and social media management strategies because number one, they still account for most local activity. So although we're seeing this turn toward AI tools, 84, 85% of Americans still use Google at least 10 times a month, much more than ChatGPT. And so, those traditional strategies, we might call them, are still super important, but many of them feed directly into LLM results, which again is a part of what we're going to be talking about here. Um, I see people are sharing LinkedIn on chat. Does anybody have any comments on this first recommendation at all? Are we already devoting a significant portion of our local marketing to LLM optimization, or is that something that we're still thinking about doing? Please feel free to come off mute or
Like Alex came off mute, or would you like to say something?
Yeah, one of the things I was going to share is that we've been very actively optimizing our website currently for LLMs. One thing that we're doing is creating. So we're a property management company. We have over 50 plus properties, and each of those properties have their own individual pages on our website. So one of the things that we've been doing is working with our web developers to create FAQ pages for every single property. And we still haven't decided exactly how we want it to be displayed, if we're going to have it like in a menu, but essentially it's going to be part of the website code with an LLM.txt file that's going to be sent out in Google Search Console to be indexed and make it super easy for Google to find results that are very property specific. That's one thing that we're doing. And another is something that I'm going to be working on implementing this week, actually, is for our specific industry, we have apartment complex schemas for our property pages. So for whatever industry, just make sure that you're optimizing your page schemas for the relevant service or product that you're offering. That way, the LLM can check what service or product that your website is advertising at a glance. It should be like it's super easy for the LLM to find this information. I know a lot of us get, caught up in the design of everything, making sure everything looks nice, but ultimately there should be a wireframe on the back end that makes things super easy for the LLMs.
Yeah, Alex, those are great recommendations, and in fact, we're going to see some of these things coming up in future slides. And Caroline's saying adding in custom schema and beefed up the FAQs on our website, looking for inspiration on what else we could be doing. Yeah, I mean, those are all great ideas. I don't mean to preempt myself here, but one of the key recommendations is to use your website, your local landing pages, to publish structured data that answers the question, why should a customer choose you over the competition? Just to directly do that and to do it in a structured way and in a detailed way. And we'll get into some of those specifics as we go here. Um, Optimize the recommendation number two, optimize the local profiles that provide core data to LLMs. So you're going to hear a lot of conversations out there in the market these days about niche directories, maybe older directories you might remember from the past, like yellowpages.com and so on. To some extent, and I'm going to get to this, to some extent, that kind of optimization can be helpful, but most of your attention when it comes to LLMs, and when we're talking about third-party profile optimization, not your website, but your third-party profiles, should really be focused on sites like Google, Yelp, and Bing. And I'll talk about social separately, but Google, Yelp, and Bing are really powering most LLM answers when it comes to local discovery. And I'm talking about, where does the LLM get your phone number from? Where does it get a star rating from? Where does it get that fundamental information that people are going to be looking for in order to transact with you? So, although we've been saying this for a long time, ensuring your profiles on these platforms are accurate, up to date, consistent, fully optimized, fill out all the fields, enable all the features that are relevant in your category. This is going to be especially important now because that's where LLMs are going to get their data from. And I've got this chart that I put together to kind of show you how data is flowing through the LLM ecosystem when it comes to these local answers, local information. And I'm setting aside the business website, although it's partly accounted for because Google search and Bing search are represented here. But in terms of the local profiles and the primary sources that LLMs are using, so over here on the left, we have ChatGPT, which has a known partnership with Bing. It uses Bing as its main search index, although it's been alleged that, and there's actually evidence that appears to prove that ChatGPT is also indirectly accessing Google search data. So both Google and Bing, and certainly Google Maps data and Bing Places information, are going to be feeding ChatGPT as a primary source. Gemini, which powers AI mode and AI overviews, like I was mentioning a minute ago, is going to get most of its information from Google Maps when it comes to local. And whatever website is linked to your Google Maps, they may go to that as well. But Google Maps is kind of the center of that universe. It's the place where you are defined as a local entity in Google's knowledge graph, if you're familiar with that terminology. And Gemini is grounded in the knowledge graph. And so Google search and Google Maps are the most important places to optimize by far when it comes to Gemini search. And then Perplexity, there's a dotted line from Google. That's because the same alleged source that gets Google data into ChatGPT is also supposedly doing that for Perplexity. So there may be some Google data showing up, but we know for sure that Perplexity has a partnership with Yelp. And so you'll see lots and lots of Yelp content when you ask Perplexity for local results. So Yelp kind of comes back again into relevance due to its presence in that ecosystem. And of course, I should mention that Yelp is heavily indexed in local results in Google and also in Bing. So Yelp optimization is going to get you the benefit of reinforcing your Google presence, your Bing presence, and of course, feeding directly into Perplexity. Questions about that? Discussion about profile optimization? We can talk about any aspect.
There's one thing that I wanted to share, just that we've noticed that I had a discussion with our associate rep about. We don't think that ChatGPT pulls information from Google based on interesting discrepancies that we've noticed. We think that Bing pulls information from Google Maps and then
Yeah.
feeds it to ChatGPT. And the reason why I'm saying this is sometimes we submit changes into our listings in Soci, and there'll be a difference with the piece of information, let's say a tracking number between Bing and Google. What we've noticed is that Bing, instead of updating to the one that we've specifically provided for Bing, it's pulling the Google number that should be associated only with the Google Maps listing. And then ultimately, Bing takes whatever information we put on the Google profile, puts it on the Bing profile. So that's how we've come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And again, I can't really find a definitive resource for this, but that's just our experience. So we've seen that Google is being used as a source of truth for Bing, which is very bizarre, but
So I talk about that actually, Alex, a little bit in an article I published on Search Engine Land back in the spring, where what I at the time felt I was seeing was that when Google data was showing up in ChatGPT, it was kind of like you're saying, it was coming indirectly through Bing. Like an example that I saw crop up several times was that ChatGPT would report on the Google average rating of a business, but it was getting that average rating from the business's local landing page where that rating was being republished. It wasn't getting it from Google. But this is a very active discussion right now. I won't get into all the allegations of how the Google data is getting in there directly, but supposedly ChatGPT has a relationship with this company called SERP API, where it's pulling in this Google data that SERP API is scraping. But your results are going to vary a lot depending on what you're searching for and when you know who you are and where you are geographically. There's a lot of confusion out there just because of the variance of the results. Yeah. Um,
There was one question from Hayden. Do we know where Copilot pulls from?
yeah, so Copilot is powered by ChatGPT in combination with Bing, but it's a little bit different from native ChatGPT in that it is directly grounded in Bing Places data. So what you should be seeing, so ChatGPT uses Bing Places as a signal, but it's not as direct as that. Whereas with Copilot, what you should be seeing is Bing Places really being the grounding of local results in when you're searching Copilot for local information. Very, very similar to Google Maps grounding Gemini answers. There's also a mention, yeah, no problem, Hayden. There's also a mention from Mandeep about you mentioned using FAQ, local schema, et cetera, but also please ensure that you're allowing AI crawlers on your site. That's true. There's a Mandeep, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. There's I think it's a robots.txt file entry that allows the ChatGPT bot to crawl your site, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes, and I can share that with you. Especially like at least allow like Googlebot to access if you don't want to allow like OpenAI or Perplexity bot. But yeah, there's a TXT file that you could put it in your website to ensure that they are crawling your
Yeah,
website.
and most of us would want to allow that. Really, the reason you would turn that off is, for instance, if you're a publisher, data to be fed into the, without paying for the content, that kind of thing. But for brands and, businesses, there's no reason why you would not want to allow that. So definitely make sure you're doing that. All right. Recommendation number 3, track additional sources LLMs use to answer local queries in your industry. So although I would say probably, 80% of your time when it comes to LLM optimization should be focused on your own website, your local landing pages, and these key local directories that we've already been talking about. But depending on your industry, there are going to be other kinds of sources that power answers for your brand. And that's a dynamic situation too. So what was true 6 months ago is not necessarily going to be true today. We mentioned the situation with ChatGPT tapping into Bing for the most part, and now there's evidence that Google content is in the mix. The most common sources are also shifting over time as LLMs improve their results through training. And by the way, local is one of the areas where the results started out being pretty shaky. I don't know if you've heard the stories about how LLMs would sometimes hallucinate, and that there even was a business. I had an example of this. It dreamed up a restaurant in my town that didn't exist. ChatGPT did. But they're getting better over time. And one of the ways that they're doing that is by refining the sources that they tap into. So you want to be conducting searches for your brand, for your category, in the markets that matter to you, and tallying what kinds of sources are powering those answers. We see TripAdvisor, we see Better Business Bureau, we see other, niche directories, depending on the industry. For hotels and restaurants, there are these well-known, hotels.com, OpenTable, that kind of thing. For your industry, it may differ, but to the extent that you can, you should be ensuring that those local profiles are accurate and complete on those directories. And you should also be encouraging reviews on niche platforms where possible. We always encourage people to ask for reviews, on Google. You obviously are not supposed to do that on Yelp, but any other site that matters. And more people are talking about diversity of review streams on multiple platforms. And that's going to be especially important if there are niche or industry platforms that your customers are using, whether it's, apartments.com or whatever the niche that you're in. If you can claim those profiles, optimize them, and ask for reviews, that's going to give you an extra boost in LLM results. Comments, questions about that one?
Marco did have a question. Is there a way for us to word something as simple as saying to ChatGPT something like, can you crawl my website for information, insert website link so that we can check whether or not it's crawlable?
You can ask ChatGPT or any LLM to retrieve information from your website that is there. Like ask a question that your website answers, for example. And that would be my recommendation. Other people might have different ideas to see if it's able to access the correct link, the correct URL, if it actually answers the question correctly. I mean, I would do a real live test of a few things that you want consumers to see when they're searching for information about your brand. All right, cool. Let's keep going. So this may be a given, and I heard Alex mention that you do this you're in property and you have local pages for every one of your properties. I know in that industry in particular, that's not always the case. Sometimes you've got the separate domain for each property, and that's supposed to be important for branding or whatever. But really, our recommendation is, if you're a franchise, if you're a chain, you're probably already doing this, but you need to have a local landing page for every location that you're trying to market. And it needs to be consistent with your online profiles. And that means stores, offices, agents, communities, whatever they are. It should be tied to your corporate domain. It should publish your contact information, obviously, but also differentiating features that make your brand stand out from the competition, that make perhaps this location stand out from others. If there's things about, the staff or features that are available in some locations and not others. You want to make sure that that's prominent on local landing pages. And I'm actually going to have a couple of recommendations related to local landing pages. This is just the first one. And obviously make sure that your data is not in conflict with your online profiles, Google, Yelp, Apple, Bing, and so on. Feel free to break in, but I think I might just kind of keep going and give you a couple more of the local landing page recommendations and then pause. So we already kind of talked about this. Recommendation number 5 is to utilize structured data on your local landing pages. Make sure your pages are well formatted and easy for search bots and LLMs to understand. And what that means is it's kind of like a UX conversation. So we're thinking about UX from the consumer, the user's perspective, clarity, concision, well-organized pages, headings, lists, bullets, FAQs. But we're also thinking of it from a machine perspective because it turns out that LLMs are looking for that kind of clarity in order to find the place on the page that has the answer to the question that the consumer is asking. And, there are stats that show that an LLM is not really going to read, for instance, all the content on a particular page. They're going to drill down to the snippet, the chunk that answers the particular question that this person is asking. So you want to make sure that that answer is easy to find. So FAQs are a great example of how to do that. If you're the reason that you're publishing FAQs in this context is because you're trying to model the behavior of a user of an LLM that might have that exact same question, and the little paragraph that you're publishing that answers that question is pretty much exactly what the LLM is going to repeat, giving you the ability to really strongly influence the way you're represented in that answer, right? And then schema markup, this is something that there are debates about how LLMs actually process schema, but fundamentally it gives the signal to the search index, which then is used by the LLM. The technical details maybe don't really matter here. That this is a local business. It's a local business of this type, or it's an apartment community, as we just heard. And it has this name, this address, this phone number. It's explicit information that machines can understand, that make sure that they know that this is the page that they need to go to get the answer to the question that the consumer is asking. So Hayden says, if it's crawling your profiles and you make a change or an update, this is a good question. How long does it take for the LLM to recognize those changes? In other words, how often does the LLM update or teach itself, or does it in real time pull that information by crawling? So, okay, let me do the quick and dirty answer to that question. LLMs are trained on a big bunch of static data. And when they can answer a question, let's say about a historical event, they're going to pull from that static data, and that data is not updated in real time. It's updated occasionally, but not in real time. But in order to perform searches of the kinds we're talking about, they do this thing called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And basically what that means is they tap into a search engine to add to the knowledge that the LLM already has with information that's more contemporary or that may change often. And local search information is one of those categories where it's going to tap into search. And so for that kind of information, what I'm hearing is that LLMs are updated in a matter of days. So they're very quickly refreshing their access to new search index information. And therefore, when you make a change to your website and somebody conducts a local search, that information, that update should be reflected, I would say in less than a week on average, even sooner in some cases. My last point about local landing pages is actually based on this great little blog post. You can see the citation at the bottom Phil Rozek is a local SEO, been around for a long time. He published this post called Easy Win for AI Local SEO, a strong Why Choose Us page on your site. You can also think of it as a Why Choose Us section of your site. It's sort of like an FAQ, but a little bit broader in its orientation. What he suggests is that you could literally call it Why Choose Us, because LLMs are uh, lazy. They're simple. They're looking for the exact text that answers, can you recommend the best X in Y, right? And so if they see a section on a page that says why choose us or words to that effect, they're going to go straight there to get the answer. And the kinds of content that you might include would be things like, what do I offer? What is my brand's uniqueness or main strengths? And signs of authority, like how many years in business do I have? Answers to questions like what is my typical turnaround time, pricing, policies on quotes or estimates, what are my awards, certifications, distinctions. You can include first or third party review content, anything else your ideal customer might ask, right? So this is just a list of ideas. It's a partial list. He's got a longer list on the blog in the blog post. But the basic thing is you're trying to imagine a deep dive into what your ideal customer would want to know about you, that you're providing answers to all of those questions in a section of your local landing page that could quite literally be called Why Choose Us. You're really just trying to tee up that information in as direct a manner as possible for the LLMs to consume. So that's my last local landing page recommendation. Let me just pause and see if people want to weigh in on or ask questions about any of those items, unless you've, of course, already done so.
Looks like we're good in the chat, but anyone want to come off mute if you have questions? Looks like we're good, Damien.
All right, well, let's keep going then. So I have a little uh, set of stats here before I get to the next recommendation from Resanio, I guess is how you pronounce them, a study they published in September. LLM behavior is different. The queries are longer and more complex. The first message in an LLM query averages about 8 words, which is more than double Google's 3.5 word average. Users are asking more elaborate questions, more long tail types of questions, not just simple keyword searches, sushi San Francisco. It's, best sushi restaurant that has, seating for large groups and vegan options and reservations available, et cetera. Extended conversations are the norm. So 60% of conversations involve more than 5 exchanges. 35% extend beyond 8 messages. This is really a fundamental shift, not just in the place where people are asking questions, but the way that they ask questions. It's becoming more conversational, going from one-shot search queries to an ongoing dialogue. And it's beyond simple fact finding as well. Only 48% or so of queries are simply seeking factual information, where you could say that LLMs are directly competing with search engines. 16% are requesting opinions or suggestions. This is where, reviews become especially important. Almost 15% involve, creative content generation. LLMs are serving broader use cases than traditional search. And hopefully that underlines some of the reasons why these nuanced answers really need to be present in your online profiles to the extent that they can be, but your local landing page, your business website is really the place where you have no restrictions, where you can provide as much content as you need to in order to show what differentiates you and to answer these more nuanced queries that people will have. Recommendation number 7, monitor reputation, encourage customers to leave reviews. So again, if at least 16% of LLM users are asking for opinions or recommendations, but really, if you think about local, it's got to be more than that, right? Because if people are saying, tell me about, dry cleaners in Brooklyn or whatever the category and geography might be, the LLM needs to have a way to rate and rank those results. They're not going to tell you about everyone in the world. They're typically going to answer, 3, 5, 7. The numbers vary, but it's going to be a short list of the best examples. And reviews are going to be a primary source of what does it mean to be best. So Google and Yelp are going to be the most important sources of rating information across all industries. That goes back to our ecosystem chart where I showed you that, Google and Yelp reviews are really feeding that LLM content. But depending on your industry, there are going to be other sites that matter more. And I mentioned, apartments.com, hotels.com, depending on your niche, TripAdvisor, OpenTable, those reviews are going to often power those answers as well. I see Facebook recommendations showing up in LLM responses. And, wherever you can, you're going to want to encourage customers to review your business. Again, focus on that review diversity. Don't just ask for reviews in one channel. And don't forget to respond in a timely and personalized way to positive and negative reviews. This is a sign of local trust. Our research shows that 65% of consumers are more likely to do business with you if you respond to your reviews. And we believe that LLMs are going to ingest those trust signals as well, making you more likely to be recommended in their responses.
Damien, we have some questions.
Yeah.
We have a couple coming through. From Caroline, do other brands respond to reviews for their locations, or do you leave it up to the local locations to respond?
Oh, yeah, that's a big question. It can be done either way. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to respond as to what they do, but it really just depends on how the way your organization is set up. But for instance, Sochi supports both models where it could be centralized or it could be delegated to the location manager.
Yeah, Valerie Stover, she said we leave it up to our locations, and that sucks.
Yeah. It can be really hard. It can be really hard to wrangle. One of the benefits of AI powered review response, for example, is that it can be more consistent, more timely, more on brand, et cetera. At Batteries Plus, we're centrally responding from Corp, I saw. So yeah, that maybe is the favored model in a lot of ways because there is more control. Um, let's see. I lost track of where we
Um,
were. Lawrence.
would you
Yeah.
recommend featuring the Why Choose Us towards the top of page or better at the bottom of the local pages? I'm thinking both SEO and user experience.
Um, LLMs are pretty good at finding the content where it lives on the page, regardless of whether it's at the top or the bottom, as long as it's clearly labeled. In my mind, from a UX perspective, I think I would probably favor basic contact information at the top and why choose us content at the bottom. I'm not sure that it matters a ton, but that seems like a better user experience to me. Chloe's saying we use Genius Reviews to handle responses on behalf of local users. And I think we got through all the
Yeah, I
questions.
think we're good. Anyone else? You can come off mute and just ask if you guys have anything else. If we're missing anything, just shout it out. I think we're good, Damien. We can keep moving.
So do engage with local audiences on social media. This is recommendation number 8. Note the social sites that appear in your top LLM sources, such as Facebook and Reddit. Engage at the local level by posting, joining conversations, responding to feedback. Um, don't treat social platforms as purely promotional. Use them to build local trust and authority by posting content that is informative and helpful. I've been saying that for years, but again, authority and trust are things that LLMs use to choose sources and choose results to favor. So there's this new reason why it's important to make sure that you're not just being promotional, but you're actually being informative and helpful. I will tell you, this is a kind of a weird topic for local, but the hot site to be talking about with LLMs right now when it comes to social is Reddit. I don't know if you guys have been hearing this, but Reddit is among the top 3 most cited sources across all LLMs, ChatGPT, Perplexity, doesn't matter which one you're talking about. and it is showing up in answers of all kinds, believe it or not, including recommendations for local brands. It may be more likely to show up if your brand is in a category that's more consultative. I need an insurance agent, I need an attorney, and somebody that where you really want to weigh, feedback and recommendations from a lot of different people. Thus, you might go to Reddit for that. But Reddit's really showing up in a lot of places. I'm not saying I have a good solution to how to optimize for your brand on Reddit. It's a really an emerging conversation, but I'm calling that out as something that we want to start paying attention to. Yes, we need a Reddit playbook. I'm hearing, how do I get on the Reddit situation when I absolutely avoid it, says Valerie. Yeah, I would say, when TikTok was starting to really blow up a couple of years ago, the first recommendation that we would give would just be to say, go on Reddit, find subreddits that are relevant to your brand, see what kinds of conversations are happening there, start to assess whether it makes sense to try to join those conversations in some way, build awareness. That's really what I would say right now. I'm calling it out as something that is important, but I don't really think there's a good like packaged solution to the opportunity at this point.
I just wanted to add into the Reddit thing. So I noticed that Reddit was becoming heavily cited maybe a couple years ago,
Yep.
for very random search results as like a top source, a top citation. And I was interested and I kind of went down a rabbit hole and I discovered that people, um, there are entire agencies now dedicated to this that essentially infiltrate subreddits, become verified users on
Yep.
those subreddits, and then ask questions periodically with one account, and then answer them with the cited page. Like, let's say it's your FAQ page as a response saying, oh, you'll probably find the answer here, and then they'll give like an in-depth answer. So it's pretty deep. And
Yep.
I think it was, for our company at least, it was pretty overwhelming to do ourselves. So we've kind of waited that out. But it's a pretty elaborate like farming, SEO farming strategy to go into Reddit. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be like an easy add-on to anyone's playbook, but from what I've seen at least, it's pretty complex. Like it involves multiple users being created, and it kind of sucks because our own pages can be incredibly optimized and we would be getting outranked on a specific search term just because it's in like 10 different fake subreddit threads and there people are paying for that.
People
So
are paying for it. Yep.
yeah, so it's like kind of cheating the organic element of it, but yeah, Reddit is being heavily crawled.
So if you've been around long enough, you probably know in the old days of SEO, there were black hat, they called them, techniques like keyword stuffing. And there was one contingent of people that would say, don't do that. And there was another contingent that said, well, but it works, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at right now with things like, there's bot posting on Reddit. It's, we're talking, I don't know if you're talking about bots or real people, but there's plenty of AI content on Reddit, which
Oh
is
yeah.
garbage content. And I would want to stand up and say, let's not contribute to that. It's
Hmm.
probably not going to work out well in the long term, even if it gives you short-term gains. And it's going to degrade the ecosystem to the point where people are, going to get annoyed. And that ultimately, I think, would not be good for the brand, right? So I would encourage, if you're going to get into Reddit at all, you're going to want to try to figure out a way to do it that's actually authentic. And to go back to my point, also informative and helpful, which is something that some brands can really lean into. You already have recommendation type content, maybe blog content, maybe TikTok or YouTube content. Think about how that fits into a Reddit model. In the interest of time, I just want to mention, do we need to end now, Leah, or do we have a minute or two?
If everyone wants to stay for a little bit, Damien still has some important insights to share. So we have so much packed into this. It should have probably been more scheduled for an hour, but we can keep going, Damien.
or please, everyone, if you have to drop, please feel free. But what I'm going to do is just keep going for a couple of minutes. And I think my strategy is going to be to say, I'll give you the last two recommendations, and then we can just talk in general about anything that you want to. Recommendation number 9 is to build local authority through press, PR, and community involvement. This is not a new recommendation, but it's something I'm hearing a lot when it comes to LLMs, that they're going to look for, the local newspaper, the local chamber of commerce. Are you sponsoring the Little League team? You've heard about this in the SEO world for a while, I'm sure. But again, LLMs, it's a renewed reason to build authority at the local level, using those sources. If you can get reviewed by the local restaurant reviewer or anything like that, might be easier in more urban environments where those kinds of publications are more common. But these are techniques that are definitely going to pay off in LLM visibility. SMBs are probably going to be doing this a lot in the coming months, especially. But if you're a multi-location brand that can get this kind of coverage at the local level, you certainly should be cultivating it. And then finally, this is sort of a general recommendation. Connect your brand voice to your local digital presence. So, because all of the content that we've been talking about in your website and local profiles is going to be very likely cited by an LLM if it answers the question the user is asking, you want to be thinking about, how does my brand strategy get translated into a local marketing moment, right? A response to a review, a post on Reddit, if that's relevant for you. Remember, every local digital interaction is a marketing opportunity. And also, when people have questions in social, when they leave a review, don't leave customers hanging, because this is going to end up being a mark against you in terms of LLM discoverability. So there's a lot of opportunity to use those local moments to become content that's going to get served up to an LLM. There's also a lot of risk involved in not taking advantage of those opportunities. So that's my final recommendation. What does anybody have as any comments or questions that you might like to share to round us out? You don't have to have anything, but I'll stay here for a minute or two in case people have things they want to say.
Yeah. Any last minute questions, thoughts? Okay, so do you recommend websites be more scrollable or having click-through sliding information?
I don't think I have a strong, I'd be interested in other people's thoughts. I don't really have a strong opinion about that in terms of LLM visibility, as long as you're not using heavy JavaScript, because it is pretty much a certainty that LLMs are still unable to process JavaScript. So the content needs to be indexable by the LLM. But as long as it is, I don't think that there's a strong preference in the scrollable versus click through or sliding.
John, not regarding AI. Sorry, I'm just reading more. Not regarding AI, but on mobile devices, scrollable might be a little. Oh, that was just Caroline responding, I think.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of recommendation for what to do when we notice AI pulling in incorrect data? We had AI hallucinating bad reviews for one of our properties the other day because it was pulling reviews from property with the same name.
Was it pulling reviews from another one of your properties or somebody else's? Somebody else's, you're saying. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the the challenge here, and it's a pretty significant challenge, is that, ChatGPT, for example, I don't know if you're talking about ChatGPT, but there is no way to claim your ChatGPT profile, owner verify the profile, ensure that this information is coming directly from the business and feeding into the ChatGPT response.
So,
It's all very indirect now,
so do you
right?
need it? So Chloe is saying it was actually from ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. So yeah, the only thing that you can really do right now, and this kind of speaks to the recommendations I was offering earlier, is to make sure that you're providing as many signals as possible as to what the correct information is. So, if you've already taken care of, you've got your Bing Places profile, your Google profile, your Yelp profile, kind of all saying the same thing that your business website says. If you're not republishing third-party reviews on your local landing page for the community that reinforce what that correct rating should be, that could be a tactic that you might try. And then if all else fails, the other thing that you can definitely do is get a bunch of people to go on ChatGPT, and if they get that incorrect answer, say, no, that's not correct. Here's where the right rating is, link. And that's going to go train the LLM to maybe give a better response the next time. After all, that is supposedly how LLMs learn.
Awesome. Any questions that we've missed or any questions that anyone still wants to ask before we end?
Hey, Damien, I have a question, and this is kind of not specific tactically, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it. And by the way, thank you. This has probably been the most productive 53 minutes that I've spent in probably this year learning about AI. I really appreciate that. But
Great.
so I'd love to hear your perspective. So we got all these things, right? So we, as marketers, know that we have and especially as multi-location marketers, we have like times 17,000 of all the recommendations, right? So we've got all these things, and there's all these things you could try, and all these things on these pages and the schemas and all the stuff. And then you have your owners and your C-suite who think they're experts because they know how to use ChatGPT. And then you have the PE that owns you, and they think they're extra experts. And then they harp on one. Like, how would you frame that thing when they pick up on the one little stupid thing, and they're like, now your whole focus for the next year needs to be on fixing this one thing for me?
Yeah.
And you're like, you're not even our customer. I don't even care that you're seeing the wrong thing. Like, how would you frame like our attack method to like getting these 10 plus ideas into playing to market when you have 5, 6, 700 locations and you're working on it?
Yeah. Well, I did want to make sure I said at the very beginning that LLM optimization needs to be placed in the broader context of local SEO, local social media management, as it's one of the new things that you should be starting to pay attention to. It's not necessarily the most important thing in the world, right? It needs to
Right.
be put in the right context. It's still only about a third of people who are going to be using ChatGPT to search for local recommendations, whereas 95% of people are likely to use Google for the same thing. So you need to start where with what matters. The other thing is that many of the recommendations I've been reciting here are things that also help with local
Regular
SEO
SEO.
that you should have been doing anyway, frankly.
Yeah, that's
And
what I
this
try
is
to tell
just
them.
another reason, perhaps one way to really frame it is to say, look, you wouldn't give me the budget last year or the year before or the year before that, but now it really matters, right?
Right. No,
This could be a new reason to have that conversation.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. That's what I try to tell them that all the time. They're all freaking out. We're going to get left behind. And I'm like, well, I think people who were doing SEO badly before should be freaked out. But if
Right.
we were on the right path before or doing it with the right hat on, then we should be halfway okay
Right.
in this
Right.
situation.
Yeah, and it's an orientation toward those more long tail nuance, questions. So that means you really need to have a deep understanding of your buyer persona, for example, and translate that into online content, So that may be a deeper dive than you've done before, and there may be new reasons to prioritize that, but a lot of it is just these fundamentals that are now important in a new area and a new channel. And the way you capture traffic on that channel is to do all of these things that you should have been
Yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, let's see if do we still have time? I saw a couple of questions in chat, Leah. I guess we could
So
keep going to the top of the hour.
we can go to,
Um,
we got 3 minutes.
So Kelly says, is there a best way to see how or if your property is showing up in LLMs or just test it out? Yes. So we are certainly doing that research ourselves, and we'll be able to help you with that to some extent. But you can go ahead and conduct those searches. I would encourage you to do it. You can even just use an Excel spreadsheet to tally up the sources that you're seeing in ChatGPT, the sources that you're seeing mentioned by Gemini, which is mostly Google Maps, but there are going to be some other things, and tally up the ones that appear the most frequently. It's certainly possible to do that type of thing manually as well. Caroline, do you find that LLMs are catering to your search history if they know it, or should it be relatively consistent for different users? Yeah, I didn't really have time to get into this, but personalization is definitely a big factor with LLM search. They do remember everything you've ever asked them if you enable that, and they're going to give you a different answer than somebody else would get on the basis of knowing that you're a parent and you live in this town and you have these preferences, etc. At the end of the day, it's a lot to try to track. You know what I mean? So I would say the core fundamentals are probably not going to change that much, but it is true that, and you should be aware that different people are going to get different answers. I'm not sure if I got to the end of the question. I think I probably did there.
So I just added to Kelly's question. She was asking, like, is there a best way to see how your property is showing up in LLMs? We're currently using BrightEdge. They actually recently rolled out this feature in their service called AI Catalyst. Basically, this tool, BrightEdge is a very expensive platform. It has a lot of uh, quirks and setup, but once it's properly set up, essentially what this tool does is that you basically have to think like the end user and come up with prompts that you would imagine your ideal customer to be inputting in these chats. So you come up with these long tail prompts that are gonna hopefully result in your property, your brand being an answer or a citation for the question that you put in. So it's a tool that basically tracks how many times you're mentioned and how many times you're cited as a URL citation for those prompts that you put in. It's a really cool tool. They're gonna roll out like recommendations to optimize certain pages and things like that in the future. But I can imagine this would be interesting if Soshi was able to come up with some kind of a tracker like this in the future too.
Yeah, well, there's both how often and in what context are your web pages cited?
Yeah,
That's important. And then the other part of the question, I think, was what third-party sources
exactly.
are cited when answering questions about you,
Mhm.
right? And it's that part that we're compiling some data about that right now. And I did do some early research showing, for instance, that ChatGPT is most likely to cite both Yelp and your business website, and then a bunch of other sources, but none of them were nearly as important. So
Cool.
yeah, that's good to dig into as well.
Cool. Are you going to be sending us this slide deck, Damien?
Are we, Leah? I don't
Uh,
know the answer to that.
we can share some of the slides. I will have to fix it up, but I will have a follow-up for everyone.
Okay, cool. I'd
I
love
also
to share this with my team.
Yeah, also I wanted to say now that we've gone over time, I'm glad this was very insightful and everyone had a great conversation over it. I dropped in the chat that we have a new advocacy program for our customers. It's called Sochi Circle. So it's for any marketer. It's, share your voice, just a community. It's brand new, but the link is in there. You'll continue to get invited to events like this. But we'll send a follow-up out, and I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Damien, so much. Thanks for everyone for participating.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Damien. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone.